come and pick us up, put our lives at risk. What are you doing? That's so selfish, blah, blah, blah. By the time we got back to where my mom lives down the road, it was the fight was going to be on. As soon as we got out of the car, it was my Uncle Jimmy, or my Uncle Mike, and my brother Jimmy against me and my brother Nathan. And the reason I tell you this story, because that hurt me. That my brother Jimmy would side with my Uncle Mike to cause harm to me or his other brother Nathan. And when we got out, there was a fight. And it consisted of bats and 2x4s kind of fight. It was really ridiculous. Isn't that what anybody seen the movie Bowl? Okay, if you had boys, you did. But it's ridiculous. And it hurt. Because the way I looked at it, I thought, your family, you're my blood, you're not supposed to hurt me. Hurt me. Would a pipe hurt you? A 2x4? So, I remember from that moment on, it caused a disconnect between me and my brother Nathan and my brother Jimmy. And until God come into my life, that scar remained. And when Christ come into my life, I had to give him forgiveness, even though Jimmy never asked for it. Didn't even deserve it in the world standards, but neither did I. So I gave it as a gift. Not that I was riding high on my forgiveness horse, because that wasn't me. It was because God forgave me, and I was forwarding that forgiveness to him. And I had to forgive him, because if I didn't, it would have affected my future. Just last year, he come to the house, opened up my home to him, and he stayed for, some of you know Jimmy, he was here before he moved back to Las Vegas. I hope he was able to see there was no wall barriers between me and him while he was here. I gave it to God. And he opened up my home, and he went hunting this last hunting season, last fall, and everything's fine. But it wouldn't have been, I want you to hear this is the point of the whole story, it wouldn't have been had I let the hurt remain. Had I not dealt with the hurt properly. And there's hurts in our lives, hurts in our childhood that we carry into our adulthood. And unless dealt with godly and properly, it will affect your future and how you treat people. And that's what God wants you to deal with today. Usually, if we research our life, we can find something that broke our spirit in our past. I remember a story of a preacher. He told the story that he said there's the schools. There was two schools, like let's hypothetically, let's say Morgantown and University. They was going back and forth of where the boundaries was of who went to UHS and who went to Morgantown High. Well, this pastor, he told this story. He going back and forth every year. It seemed like a change. And one year they just changed. He was an athletic type of person, and they kept on going back and forth with changing the boundaries. He'd be at this school one year, this school the other year, and then finally came around. They changed schools again, and they told him, if you want to attend this school, which is closer to home and everything, you can't play athletics for a year and everything like that. And so he's like, fine, I'll just bear out the year. I don't like it, but I'll bear out the year. And then he attended this one sporting event, and there was this vending truck about halfway across the field at one of the end zones and stuff. So he goes to this vending truck, and he talks to these girls from the other side of the opponent's team and stuff. And so he's a few feet away from this vending truck. The next day, and while in class, he gets called to the principal's office, and that's never a good thing, especially at his age, where that's where they gave whippings back then. And he gets called to the principal's office, and that's what they told him. They said, listen, you're going to get a couple swats because you was on the opposing sides. That's against the rules to be on the opposing sides. There's guidelines. There's a rule. There's a line there. You can't cross that line. You crossed that line when you went to that vending truck. You can't do that. And as unfair as that sounds to you and me now, it was as unfair to him then. And he took his whipping. But he later confesses that broke his spirit at school. And from that moment on, he went back to class that day, and he looked at his friends, and he said, he made a deal with them. He said, let's see by the end of the year who can get the most swats. And they went and stretched habit. He ended up getting the most swats at the end of the year, for getting in trouble constantly. And finally the principal had to tell him, if I see your face in front of me again, you will not graduate this high school. But the point of the whole story is this, is that there are things in our lives that has broken our spirits, that has caused us to react bitterly or ungodly to something. And God would have you to deal with that today, or in the days to come. God would have you to deal with that. Because you're dealing with it on your own and in your own ways. I wanted the fourth thing. We all deal with pain in some way, right or wrong. We all deal with it. We all deal with pain in some way, right or wrong. We just can't sit back and not deal with it. You agree? Can't sit back and just let pain happen. We got to deal with it. But we deal with it whether right or wrong. By not dealing with it in our adult lives, if you're the type of person not deal with pain and always run away from it, then we affect our children's lives by not dealing with pain. I want to talk to you about David, Solomon, and Absalom real quick. They are case studies in how not to deal with pain in our lives. David medicated his pain. How many people do you know around you today medicate their pain? When we don't deal with our pain properly, when he didn't deal with his pain properly, he medicated the pain with sex, or people do this with sex, drugs, alcohol, food, gambling, and other things, just to make the pain go away temporarily. Reality and life are too hard to deal with, so they deal with it that way. David medicated his pains with sex. He had many wives. He watched Bathsheba as she bathed on the mountain, on the rooftop, as they did back then. And as a result of that, he committed murder to have her hand in marriage. He lied to people because of it. David had issues. You ask, what was David's pain? Well, Samuel the prophet was told to go to Jesse's house, David's dad, father, to anoint a king. And so when Samuel the prophet went to Jesse's house, David was the 8th and youngest son of Jesse. The youngest son of Jesse. And when Samuel the prophet came to Jesse's house, David was the only son that Jesse did not bring before Samuel. Jesse left David in the sheep barn to tend to the sheep, which I think is ironic. But he left him in the sheep barn to tend to the sheep. Didn't present him before Samuel. Samuel looked at Jesse and said, none of these is what God's telling me is the king, is to be anointed as king. Do you have another son? And Jesse said in disbelief, he gave one of these comments, well, there's David. And being that David was the youngest of 8, he probably didn't get much of his father, as we can see here. So David had his pain in life that he was medicating. Maybe the lack of the father example, the feeling of being last, the youngest, the not as important. David had his pain, but he medicated his pain with sex and lies, murder, mainly sexual things. You see, when you're dealing with the addiction of alcoholism or drug addictions or food addictions or gambling addictions or sex addictions, the issue is never the issue. Some people say, well, the alcohol's the issue. No, the pain's the issue. I have been in AA meetings with brothers in the Lord, and one of the first steps in the meeting is to fess up. It's to fess up. Start talking about the things you don't want to and won't talk about. That's the first step. Solomon. Solomon, he motivated his pain. Solomon was basically a workaholic. He worked all the time. He was an overachiever. He built the greatest nation in the history of the world. And he was the richest man in the history of the world. And there has never been a man that could rival Solomon's riches. He had so much gold that he made silver worthless. Well, you ask what was Solomon's pain? Well, first of all, he was the son of David and Bathsheba. Illegitimate child, so to speak. His father killed his mother's former husband. He would have basically made the this is like the story that would have made the National Enquirer every week, because he was the son of scandal. He killed his brother to become king. This is Solomon. Solomon had to kill his brother to ascend to the throne, and Solomon had to watch his brother Absalom try to kill his father. This is just to name a few in Solomon's life. You think he had issues? His family was filled with pains. Solomon built, and he built, and he worked, and he worked. He was a workaholic. So he motivated his pain. He didn't want, the busier he was in his mind, the less he had to think about what happened in his family. And people do that today. They work so much that they're so busy working that they don't pay attention to what's going on in their family. Or they don't pay attention so much to themselves that they don't realize they have a broken spirit. They need to renew that spirit with God. They don't realize that they're kicking family members to the curb while they're medicating or motivating their pains. Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 9 through 11. You don't have to turn there, but it says, I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. And this is what Solomon is saying was the result of all of his work. Ecclesiastes 2, chapter 9, verses 9 through 11. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all this my wisdom stayed with me. I denied myself nothing my eyes desire. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my work, and this was the reward of all my labor. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done, and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless. A chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. Everything was vanity. When you're in pain, one of the ways we deal with pain is when you're at home, you turn the radio on, you turn the TV on, you call up a friend, you go out with a friend, you call a family member, the pain haunts you until you're talking about it. And we do all these things to medicate our pain or to motivate our pain. Some people go to the bar, some people resort to drugs. Some people resort to work. Well, I just want to work. I'm tired of dealing with it. And you go to work. Absalom. Let's talk about Absalom. We talked about David.